Welcome into the Bite Meat podcast. As always, you ask, we deliver. I think that should be our slogan. I'm John Lopez. This is the Bite Meat podcast, brought to you every week by Texas Star Grill Shop right here, 4 locations in the greater Houston area. And I say this every week because we've been really fortunate to have some fantastic chefs, some fantastic barbecue pit masters, from James Beard Award winners to the best of the best in the barbecue game, people in the industry. And man, happy to have Eric Gephart joining us here. Eric, fresh from North Carolina and fresh from the Cinder Block concession stand in middle school. I'm telling you what, I said this off air. You could do worse than have a chef like yourself working concessions at a middle school game, Eric.
Yeah, I had 27 degrees today.
Ooh.
The Frisbee's going on, so I got some hot chocolate, some homemade hot chocolate going on, and some apple cider and some popcorn. You know, just trying to fulfill a need there. So having fun with it.
Last time I wore what you're wearing, and for those who are just listening and not watching, I was ice fishing. So I was ice fishing in Minnesota. So I knew it was cold. I didn't know it was 27. Hopefully it's not windy, but. No, listen, man, this podcast has been really taken off, and we really appreciate everybody like yourself joining us. You heard me talking about all the great guests we've had, and appreciate you joining us. But your story in particular, for a number of reasons, is really interesting to me. We've been fortunate to have, chefs from, Australia, with Jess Prowls, and now in Austin, and Tennessee, and Florida, and all through Texas, and everything. Haven't had that North Carolina stuff. We had some Memphis, we had some Nashville. Haven't had that North Carolina. So I want to start there because I want to get into your culinary game, your culinary background, et cetera, because I think that's also very interesting. But we don't discriminate, against any barbecue, but it is different. And what I've told multiple people, multiple guests, we've discussed. The best part about having such differences in whether it's restaurant food, high level culinary experiences, and barbecue is it in today's world it transfers. I mean, it used to be Carolina was Carolina, Tennessee was Tennessee, Texas was Texas, et cetera, et cetera. And now, are you seeing that? Are you seeing more and more people doing things sort of intertwined?
Yeah, I think so. That's the beautiful thing about barbecue, right? It spans the gap from verb or noun. It's an action, it's a lifestyle, but also regionally, when you say the word barbecue, it might mean something different. New York, to barbecue means anything on the grill. When I say barbecue in Texas, I think of brisket. For some reason, I think of turkey as well, because that's not on the menu in a lot of places year round. And then when you say it in North Carolina, it means pork, obviously, right? Mm-hmm. So but I see a lot of chefs who went through the system and have done really well with it and gotten into whatever aspect they want to, whether it's fine dining or fun dining, going back to their roots. And I love to see it. They're cooking food that means something to them now that it's their turn and they've paid their dues. And growing up feral, barefoot here in North Carolina, shoveling coals my whole life, professional culinary, I kind of did the same thing. So it's great to see it and find like-minded souls out there on the road that are doing the same.
You mentioned how you grew up, and I wanted to go exactly there. Good transition by you. It's supposed to be my job, but I appreciate you doing that because the transition is from, backyard. I somebody sent me a picture of my father behind a barrel pit to just today because it was an anniversary of his, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, that's where I learned, just in a good old barrel pit, Brackenridge Park in San Antonio before I came to Houston. And my question for you is, you learned similarly, but then you went to, I believe it was London Cordon Bleu, is where you were. Where was it?
No, I was Hyde Park, New York, Culinary Institute of America.
Oh, Hyde Park. Okay. Okay.
But I spent a good stint in London and in Australia and New Zealand and all around the world chefing. But when you're learning your fundamentals, you're in culinary school, you're learning French technique, this, that, and the other. But when you're really getting down to it and you're shoveling coals like you and I, You're learning about a heat source and how that interacts with whatever protein or vegetable or starch you're doing, right? So if you get the fundamentals and understand how heat and cooling and distance work, you can, eventually just take any heat source and drive it like you stole it. So that translates through anything, whether it's, the methods: braising, poaching, grilling, smoking. And then you can start to, once you really own those methods, you can start making up your own and hot smoke, right? Everybody talks about cold smoke. I'm sure we'll get into some techniques later down the road, but it gives you carte blanche to exercise your culinary will however you like. So just interacting with the coals, cast iron cooking, hiking the Appalachian Trail as a young boy and seeing my mom make a 3-layer cake, 200 miles away from anywhere, on the trail. It's just inspiring,
A 3-layer cake while camping or whatever is quite the accomplishment. So did that, like, if you had to choose one or the other, did it help you to have that grassroots sort of background once you got to the highest level?
Yeah, because you've got to have the passion that's going to keep you driving through, right? I think ultimately you're a lot of us get into this industry, the culinary industry, trying to avoid math until we figure out math equals money, and that's how you got to keep the lights on, right? We're a bunch of misfits, dyslexics, ADDs. We kind of come by it naturally, or it finds us. But to have that calling, to have those memories early on, you don't put 2 decades into professional kitchens and come out unscathed. So to have that baseline of positivity and great experiences really helps you through the tough times, I think, mentally and physically. It's stand over the heat. There's no chairs or no windows in this industry when you're in the kitchens, and you generally get bumped onto salary at a very young age, so they can just work you 16 hours, 4 months in a row during the season, wherever you are, So it's to have true memories, true food memories where you were involved and loved ones are involved. I think that's a key element to staying power in the industry for sure.
And that's where I want to go next is, where you are now, because clearly when you reach the high culinary levels, you're doing different meats, you're doing different techniques, etc. And I thought of this question. This isn't on what I sent you before we got started here, but I did want to ask. I think you'll have a good perspective on it. So I was cooking, or I was smoking a turkey. Go figure, in Texas. But I was smoking a turkey, and another one I did on my pit was a duck confit. And I had a friend of mine come up and said, "Oh, duck confit, that's fancy," and I looked at him. I said, "It's really not that hard. It's really not. There's an intimidation factor to try new, whether it's wild game or things like that." How do our listeners get over the? Because I'm one of those guys. I haven't been trained at the highest level like you, but I take a lot of risk. I try a lot of new things over the last 40 years or wherever it's been. But from your perspective, how can people, backyard pit masters and pit masters, get over that? Oh, well, that's something I've never tried. That's got to be something that is a next level.
Well, I think one of the key elements there is when we're talking about pit masters and people who are barbecuing, there's a commonality there with this primal instinct, right? We're scratching this primal thing that we've forgotten about when we're playing with these cool techniques and lighting the flame. It's almost a instinctual act of mindfulness, right? These age-old techniques like confit were pre-refrigeration. So if we think about how our ancestors cooked and survived through the summers and through the winters with these really neat techniques, like rendering the fat out of, say, a duck or a goose, and then allowing that fat to solidify around it so that it wouldn't spoil, finding interest in understanding why that technique was used in the first place and how it can apply to what we do to make it more interesting. Because how many times are you really going to cook that brisket? Come on. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, it's great. Everybody loves it. That'll never get old. But I'll tell you, I need to understand why things are happening. I need to make those connections. I need the synapses firing. I like to understand, to visualize what happened 200-300 years ago, and be able to use those age-old techniques on top of the foundations that we already have. I think there's nothing more exhilarating than that. So
and,
Gonfi is a prime example.
Yeah, exactly. And take some risks. I mean, I'm sure that was a big factor in you, aside from ambition, of going and getting. I was talking with Erin Fegis, Patrick and Erin Fegis. They have a great barbecue place here, and she's been at the 5-star. I mean, excuse me. The 3-star Michelin and 2-star Michelin restaurants in New York and elsewhere, and she kept going back to barbecue. And she said because of what she learned there, it can also translate back, and some of the things that you learn at those levels, it's not it's a higher level, but it's not that different, is it?
It's not. Simple things done perfectly win every time. There was a bit there in the 90s and early 2000s when molecular gastronomy was a thing, and we were all, at the top 1% of restaurants in the world racing to do the coolest, weirdest thing with 70 ingredients that were in a tablespoon. I find the more mature I get and the better I get at cooking, the simpler things work so well. A very nice olive oil, a beautiful roasted chicken, gorgeous seared potatoes, nice salt. Like, get out of here. That's it, and I'm seeing that trend in, say, La Bernardin, where we've worked with Eric Ripert, the #1 chef in the world right now. Seafood's my game. I absolutely love seafood on the grill, and vegetables too. Now I'll do short ribs, tri-tip, bavette, all the fun things, Terrace Major, but to do just a beautifully locally sourced fish out of the water with a very simple sauce, I mean, that just sings my song. It really does.
You said you do fish on the grill. Is it only the grill, or do you smoke, or what are some of your favorites?
Because I come from a fine dining background, really, again, I just use that heat source. So if we're doing something like a grouper or a snapper or a flounder, one of those whitefish, or even a salmon, oftentimes I'll put a big sear on the presentation side, just salt and pepper if you like, just a great sear. And then I'll flip it into a pan of water, lemon juice, and white wine. Close the lid, close the dome, and finish roasting it. So it's almost a sear grill poach. And your listeners will love this, and I love saying it. When you're using natural lump charcoal, your fuel source is your secret ingredient, right? So even if you're searing it on a stone on the grill, flip it into that, and that liquid level is coming up about halfway the level of fish. When you close that dome, fish just accepts that natural lump charcoal flavor so well that speaks of the grill without being overly smoky, and I love that.
That's a wonderful technique too. And you mentioned the dome. I'd be remiss not to talk about Kamado Joe, which is one of those. It's one of those things, ancient and yet simple, and it's your go-to. And why is that?
Yeah, my last restaurant actually was a 375 seat restaurant that had 12, 30, had 15 Kamado Joe Big Joes, and that's all we cooked on. Yeah. So, you think
Hope you didn't move them.
No, there were 3 in the dining room, visible at what we called the captain's table, that fired off all the appetizers and desserts. So that was quite the show. You could sit up there and interact with the chefs, and that was a lot of fun. And then there were these large screen TVs all throughout that showed the kitchen. So if you ordered a beautiful Norwegian salmon, boom, you look up at the big screen, you could very well see it going down on the grill and the flames licking it, and it just drove craveability. But the celebration, Kamado does such a good job with the ceramics, and 3,000-year-old Southeast Asian technology mixed with the most forward-thinking technology in the world with the accessories, and even technology borrowed from NASA that allows the grill to contract and expand with the dimpling without the ceramic fracturing. Like, just cool stuff.
That is, and by the way, when you have cameras in the kitchen, you can't go off on each other like on the Bear. You gotta watch your P's and Q's.
I always promoted an extremely professional kitchen where no foul language was welcome. You know, and it's tough. You have to be firing at an extremely high level to keep your cool. And I came up through a kitchen industry which was just far from that, right? You know, pots and pans tossed at you. You're cleaning the ovens at the end of the night, getting kicked into a hot oven. You know, I mean, like there's no room for it anymore. I wouldn't change a thing about how I grew up in the kitchens, but I wouldn't put anybody else through it. Certainly not my kids or anybody else's kid, right? So
yeah,
it's
I was asking Erin about that because she was at these Michelin restaurants, as I mentioned. She says, "Oh yeah, that's real." She says, "Oh yeah, that is not." I mean, whoever, I think the way she put it is, whomever was their consultant had clearly worked in the restaurant like that. Would you agree with that?
People ask me quite a bit. I've never seen 1 second of one episode.
Oh wow!
I don't watch any of the culinary competitions, even though I've got a lot of friends that are successful in them and stuff. I don't know if it feels like war. I don't know. I'm not much of a TV guy either, you know. So I
PTSD, man.
I enjoy a good book. You know, I loved Kitchen Confidential when I was coming up years and years ago, but I got enough of it, you know. But I hear it is very true to form. I hear it is. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned you know, one of your restaurants where you worked. It was Eric. Who was it?
Eric Repair.
Repair. But I also saw that you had a big Matt Lauda influence. What was that about?
Matt Lauda?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not familiar. You're gonna have to.
I thought I saw that you were influenced by him. But where were your influences coming up once you got to that level?
Yeah, you know, Jose Andreas, which we've done some work with overseas and helping out with World Central Kitchen. Anthony Bourdain was a big one. You know, Eric Repair, Nancy Silverton.
Man, that's a who's who.
Those of you not familiar with Nancy Silverton too, you know, she's one of the reasons Wolfgang Puck is famous, you know. So when we do the Cayman cookout and go out there and barbecue in the Grand Cayman, all these spaces are popping up, and we get great opportunities to reconnect throughout the year at events, and just remember that you know, it is hard work, but it's also hard play. You know?
Yeah, that's an incredible who's who. You got to be thankful for just rubbing elbows.
Yeah, and I think the key there is just saying yes and volunteering for everything. You know, I mean, it's not easy. Again, a couple of decades of working in kitchens, just saying yes, chef, and soaking it all up, going in on days off and learning stations and recipes that you otherwise wouldn't have an opportunity to learn years down the road, because when you're in the restaurant and you're working saute, that's you're working the grill, that's you. But you go in on your day off and learn how to expo and see every single dish in there. So it's just a dedication to passion and craft.
That's a great experience and great advice for any of our listeners who want to do take it to another level. You mentioned hot smoke and cold smoke. Let's go into a little bit of that, because you know, like I said, every level of chef and pitmaster listens to this show. Are you more of a hot smoke guy, given you're more of a live fire guy?
I am, you know, I even on the low and slows, I'm pushing my limits. You know, you know, 275 for somebody's low and slow. That's 325 for me. You know, and so I generally go with, you know, let's say pork, for instance, and we're talking about St. Louis versus baby back. I'll go with the St. Louis just because of the fat content, and I know I can take it a little harder than the baby backs that might dry out at the hotter, faster temperatures that I like to use. You know, and those are relatively thin, so they get done quick to it. But I got some YouTube videos out there like 3, 2, 1, way too long. You know, if I can cook a whole hog in almost the same amount of time as somebody can do a back St. Louis style ribs, what are we doing? You know, so I just. But there again, I'm talking about using a ceramic grill, right? So you've got that 360 radiant heat from the ceramic, which obviously works a lot different than a grill that's got a thin metal top that's not as ergonomic, and all that heat and that kinetic and potential energy are just dissipating. You're pushing more air from the bottom in the form of heat, and then pushing air. So you're going to dry something out at a higher temperature. So I would say the moisture content in the Kamado Joes allow you to go at a higher temperature. Sorry for that tangent, but I just thought.
No, I love it. Trust me, this is the stuff we like to hear, because the follow up for me naturally is, you have to build a trust in yourself, because that old saying of if you're looking, it ain't cooking. Especially on a Kamado Joe, but really any pit, any type grill, you have to be able to trust that, okay, it's hotter than most people have said, but it's going to work, right?
Yeah. And when you're doing something like that, you got to think about your seasonings, right? When we look at the list of ingredients here in the US, the ingredients are listed by volume. So if your first ingredient there is turbinado sugar, you're going to over caramelize, aka burn, if you're going at too high of a temperature. So, just a nice salt, pepper based, start meat side down and then flip bone side. I'm going to give you my equation for any low and slow. Turn near any low and slow on the Kamado Joe. I'll start out, let's just call it 300 for argument's sake. I'm going to smoke something for an hour and a half, meat side down after it's been seasoned. And then I'm going to flip it and do another hour and a half. If we're talking pork butt or brisket or, some short ribs or chuck tail flat. At that point, I want to love the bark on both sides. I want to be at an internal temperature of at least 165, maybe 170. And at that point, I'm wrapping and I'm just using the radiant heat. You're 3 hours into it. Your meat's accepted all the smoke that it's going to accept. So at that point, you're just driving collagen to gelatin.
Yeah,
so
that's another interesting thing that I've heard various people talk about. You're accepting smoke for what, maybe an hour and a half?
Yeah.
And that's it, right? So after that, why go low and slow?
You can't rush to a temperature. You can't just go to a temperature. You're going to probe tender. You want all those beautiful intermuscular fats. The reason we pay good money for that speckling or that marbling isn't because it's fat. It's because of that magic property of it turning to gelatin. So it's collagen turning to gelatin. It breaks down. And that's what gives that sexy wobble to the gorgeous short rib, a'ka brisket on a stick. I love it. It's absolute magic. But you can't, once you do that hour and a half, you can't then just bump it up because the smoke's done. You still got to allow the meat to get there on its own, which is why I don't use a thermometer quite often.
Really?
No, but when I'm teaching it certainly helps in a reference, and when you're writing a recipe, you just have to. But I tell people every single time you use a probe or a thermometer, touch and push the meat so you can build context for the rest of your life. And I guarantee you 10 years down the road, you'll look at something. If you started the fire and you put that meat on there, you'll look at that chicken and be like, oh, that's 147.
Yeah. No, I hear
not
you.
to that degree, but you'll know whether it's done or not. And then if you touch it, you've reconfirmed that,
And then on a brisket, you can just push it until it almost gives and it's done. I mean, I've talked to a bunch of guys like that. I do that myself. The probe can work wonders, but it can also just let a lot of things in there that you don't want in there.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And another side point there, one of the most difficult things in all of barbecue, the resting period. Oh, it's enough to drive you crazy. I know guys in Texas. I know guys in Texas, talk about the Texas crutch and stuff. I know the guys in Texas that will literally let their brisket rest in a cooler wrapped in a towel for 8 hours, 6 to 8 hours.
I do too.
It's the best method going. I mean, you can't beat it. You know what I mean? I just don't have the patience for it. And I can't forget about it. I'm the worst. So
what do you do?
I do fast cooks. I do.
No, I mean, as far as resting and such.
Yeah. I'll say this. If you slice into your meat and you see a bunch of liquid on the cutting board, you automatically know all that liquid should be in each individual bite. So shame on us.
Thank you very much.
Shame on us.
Yes, thank you very much. All these videos, like, that's the thing, and I've done some, so maybe some you would laugh at some of mine, but I'm saying all these videos that I see of guys holding up that piece of and they're squeezing it and it's all coming out. I'm like, no.
What are you doing? Yeah, I get it. Social media influencers, I hear you, but and it's hard on TV or YouTube, right? You got to show them, but I'll tell you one good trick if you're doing something like a ribeye or a New York strip or something like that. If you do have some of that juice get down there after you've sliced into individual slices, what a great opportunity to forget the linear style of plating where everything's shingled and just toss that meat into that board sauce, we'll call it. Maybe you've been basting with a herb brush, chop that up, throw it in there, a little bit of flaky salt, and toss with all of that good juice on the board. And now every single slice that you've got there, you've got newly revealed real estate that hasn't seen smoke, seasoning, or sear, and you're just imparting a lot of flavor and juices in a different way. But that's a cheat code. You know,
Yeah.
you got to let it rest. You got to let it rest.
You got to let it rest. I can tell, that you and I have a lot of things in common here. First of all, the short ribs. Yes, I always say the best bite in barbecue is short ribs and beef ribs. Well, I'm a big beef rib guy, and certainly letting it rest. You know, I'll go, certainly a couple of hours. But the other thing about this is you're very simple on your spices. Now, there are a couple of rubs that it seems like you are, and I want you to talk about it. But there are some rubs that I just swear by. But good, solid cut of meat that you get, whether it's a Texas Star Grill Shop or your favorite butcher, or, good Wagyu or whatever it may be, doesn't need a lot, does it?
I don't think so, but I think of salt, we talked about this earlier in the segment, a preservation method, right? But think about what happens on a molecular level. And those of you who want to I'm the huge food nerd, and I know you have a lot of food nerds on here.
You should have heard Aaron Franklin going off. He went into all the science. He joined us. He was all about it. But so you're not breaking any new ground there, but I want to hear it.
I am right. But I was gonna recommend a book.
Okay.
By Hervé Thies, is a French molecular gastronomist, and it's called Molecular Gastronomy, but it gets into some very simple things, emulsifications and such. But he also talks about, should we really be seasoning meat with salt and then putting it on the grill? Because in a molecular sense, we're stewing versus searing because we're pulling moisture to the top. And so it got me started thinking about, well, what if we did, I've worked with a lot of the top barbecue teams in the world. In fact, Barbecue Weasel in Germany, I was the only American or international team member of their number one barbecue team that won the World Food Championship. And we would season with a 3 layering system.
Okay.
So I say it like this: white, red, brown. That's the way we throw it down. All right.
All right. I wrote down something else. I'm going to write that down too. I wrote the simple things done right.
yeah. Simple things done perfectly win every time. And white, red, brown. That's the way we throw it down. And essentially what that means, we talked about earlier, your ingredients are listed by volume. So if you look at white would be your salt. So if you put down your salt layer first and allow, when we're talking about meat, I'm going to take you back to 4th grade. The cellular structure, semi-permeable membranes, that water is going to wick out of the cell structure and kind of beat up on top. What's going to wick the top of your meat, and so then you're going to do your red. Those are your cayennes, chili powders, paprikas. And again, so if you look at your list of ingredients and it's got a little spice in there, spice is nice. All right, so we go white is the salt, red is your heat, brown is your caramelization properties, right? So those are your sugars, your turbinados, your dehydrated honeys, your sweet things. And so there's a lot of good rubs that start with sweet. You wouldn't think it would be, but look at Meat Church. A lot of that stuff is very sweet. Look at a lot of Lane's Barbecue. They use some very incredible ingredients that pair well. Now there's still some salt in there, and there's still some heat there. But if you mixed all 3 of these different seasonings and then put it on at once, it wouldn't be as good if you did the white layer, then the red layer, then the brown layer. Let that tack up, flip it over, white, red, brown again.
What's the time on this? What's the timing on this?
If you're talking about a piece of meat that's at ambient room temperature, you're probably looking at 7 to 12 minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're not sitting here for an hour. Again, I'm the 3, 2, 1 way too long guy, so I don't have too much patience. But it is a fantastic pitmaster trick to layer your seasonings, not mix them all in a bowl together and lay it on top, but take 2 or 3 of your favorite seasonings and layer them. The salty one first, the spicy one, and then the sweet one. And the sweet on beef, people, it just doesn't seem natural, but it will build up your caramelization on the outside. And I'll say some other things that are a little controversial. Like, I think, grill marks should have gone out in the 90s with edible flowers. I got no problem saying that. If we love grill marks because it drives craveability, because it's caramelization, why wouldn't we just reverse and blister sear the heck out of something on a cast iron or a soapstone and get 100% caramelization, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But that white, red, brown has really worked well for me, both in the competition series, at the restaurants, and for sure at home with the kids.
Yeah, man, you got me writing down more than I usually do here, but because I got some beef ribs I'm going to go to. I might
Nice.
try it on that. Can't let you go without talking about field to the proverbial field to table, and wild game, and things like that. We talked about intimidation earlier, but why is that so important to be able to do that, to be able to go field to table?
Everything's farm to table if we think about it. You know what I mean? I like to have a 50-mile radius no matter where I'm at. But do you mean to be able to cook it, to hunt it, clean it, and cook it yourself?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are about that, and they swear by it.
I think there's a large breakdown in our society of where our food comes from, and it gets darn right frustrating if you think about it. Everything's in a grocery store is in a styrofoam pack wrapped in cellophane, handled by somebody with rubber gloves on, checked out and put into a plastic bag, and then we're calling cows beef, so there's a separation there. We're calling chicken poultry, or pigs or pork. So we do whatever we can to separate ourselves from the cold hard facts of being active participants in our carnivorism. So I think if you're gonna eat meat, it's important to know how it's processed, and especially for children to know. We look in the cities, especially where there's not a lot of green spaces, and certainly not a lot of wildlife, or even overseas in places. We talked about being in London and such. There's just not a lot going on over there, wildlife wise. So you come to where I am right here in North Carolina. I've got an ultimate frisbee game going over here, and I guarantee if I got out in the woods out here and did a turkey call, I'll hear the coyotes. I think it depends on where you are and how you were brought up, but to be able to be a part of the process just really sings the song to my soul, and I think it, again, just like grilling or cooking over live fire, we're scratching that primal instinct that we may have forgotten about when we're doing a 9 to 5 sitting behind a computer screen, and you're able just to relax. For some people, it's opening a bottle of wine at 5 o'clock on a Friday, and your BPMs automatically drop. Well, for somebody else, it's getting up at 5:30 in the morning and climbing in that cold tree stand and not even seeing a deer, but hearing the woodpeckers go, and maybe you see something you wouldn't have before you start your day, and that's pretty special. So I think the process in general of harvesting that and then sharing it with others, all chefs will tell you, they thought they got into it for the food, but really it's a people game, right?
Absolutely.
And Winston Churchill said, "You don't sell shoes to shoes," So it's being in that dining room, poking around the corner, knowing you put 16 hours into a beef bone demi-glace, and then somebody just like eyes roll into the back of their head when they bite into that peppercorn New York strip, and they just lose their mind. That was worth all the burns and the cuts and the insults to injury and the bad relationships and the piracy of it all.
Yeah. So where are you now? What in terms of your restaurants, your expertise? What are you doing?
Out of restaurants. I got a fluff title. You'll love this. Director of culinary inspiration for Middleby Outdoor. So that's Kamado Joe, Masterbuilt, and Char Griller. I created this job. Just like I
Mhm.
created that title, I didn't want it to mean anything because I didn't want to hold a clipboard. I want to have autonomy. You know what I mean? That's really important to me. So really, all I'm doing is traveling the globe. Creating enthusiasm for the category and pushing the limits of what it means to grill. And so a lot
Mhm.
of that is taking my fine dining background and grilling a lemon and creating a beurre blanc with it and then putting it over a local turbot or flounder or whatever it might be.
Mhm.
But I always, I travel probably 75% of the year. We're going to Estonia, we're going to France, we're going to Italy, we're going to Australia a couple of times. I was a chef in New Zealand for a while, Naples, Florida, New York City. So just all LA quite a bit, Napa the last couple of weeks. So Atlanta next week. But it's just go, 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 go. I can't stop learning. Like I am miserable if I'm not outside of my comfort zone or learning something or teaching something. Like I'm a
Yeah.
miserable individual if I'm not just pushing it hard.
Yeah.
And I know that about myself. So I go hard all the time. So I'll show up to a location 2 or 3 days ahead of an event, line up something with a local hunter, a local farmer, a local fisherman, go out and learn whatever that is, and then incorporate that ingredient hunt and that ingredient and that farmer into the event. And so everywhere I go, I've just built this beautiful network for the last decade of roof thatchers, spoon makers,
That's
charcoal
awesome.
makers. You want to talk about nerds, like corner a charcoal maker and talk about distillation. I mean, it's just incredible,
Well, get into the nitty gritty.
Yeah, yeah,
They really do.
and that's what I want. I might only be able to, retain 10% of it, but I'm just fascinated with people who just get lost in a craft, and
Yeah.
that's what's drawn me and kept me to barbecue, because whether it's happening in the backyard or in the back of a fine dining restaurant, or a little kid with no shoes shoveling coals, there's expertise there, there's lineage, there's tradition, and everybody, and you just watch even if you don't speak the language, you watch the hands and you learn so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, and well, you know who to call when you come down to Texas. We'll hook you up. I know hunters, fishermen. You see the big fish I got in the back?
I've been looking at it. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's my best trout that I've caught, speckled trout or whatever they call a spotted sea trout, I guess technically. So I'm always fishing. I'm going again probably tomorrow, but we'll take care of you, man. Last thing, and we'll let you go. I know you got a lot going on. I always like to do this. It's just a personal thing. We like to let all our guests talk about any uh, programs that they might be involved with, charities, that type thing. And I know you are, so the floor is yours.
Well, thanks. We've got hit pretty hard this hurricane season here in North
Oh
Carolina.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so Western North Carolina, Asheville area, they just got water back last week, potable water, some areas. I think World Central Kitchen, dollar for dollar, dime for dime, penny for penny, does just as good a job as anybody. World Food Program, probably slightly better, but just if you give $1, 99 cents of that is not going towards just organization, but actually helping folks out. And so I've been fortunate enough to be able to be on several activations of World Central Kitchen and just think the world of what Jose Andres is doing and others. I would say if anybody's looking to get involved and you're seeing what's happening in the world, whether it's the Gaza Strip or, a hurricane hits Puerto Rico or something, an earthquake
Mm-hmm.
or a wildfire in Hawaii, whatever it is, World Central Kitchen is generally first boots on the ground, and they tap into the local chef community because they know they have a lot of local resources. And one of the things I love about that organization is they don't just want to come in there and feed people and help out. They want to get to a point where the community is self-sufficient and helping out. So they're not just getting handouts, but they're active participants and
Right.
bringing community back to where it needs to be. Operation Barbecue Relief is another great one out there. So just big, bold thanks to all those folks who are out there away from their homes, not in their warm beds year round or even a week at a time, just really helping out and helping others.
Well, Eric, that was fantastic, and I really appreciate your time. You need to get back to your is it not frisbee golf? Ultimate
Ultimate
frisbee.
yeah.
Ultimate frisbee. You need to get that back to that. You guys stay tuned for the smoking hot tip of the week, and we will get to that right now.